Okay, let's bring in our panel of Press Gallery journalists now. Susan Delacourt, a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. And John Ivison is a columnist with the National Post and Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Post Media. Susan, the government announced today funding is now available to help with searches for those Indigenous communities that want to carry out those searches for possible grave sites from the residential schools. Some questions about the timing of why it's taken so long to roll out money from the 2019 budget. Let me ask you about the government's response. Has it risen to the moment of just how much trauma and shock the discovery of these remains in Kamloops has caused across all of Canadian society?
That's a really difficult question. It's a $1 million question, actually, Peter, because there are so many levels on which the government is being asked to respond. One is rising to the moment emotionally, symbolically. And I think people have thought, I've seen some columns on such, that the Prime Minister has not been his usual emotional self about this. He's almost been restrained. I think this is a very hard one to set the perfect tone. I thought Mark Miller came close today, and Carolyn Bennett to some degree, but I was really struck by how much they talked during the press conference today about why is it taking so long. The Prime Minister gave a hint of this in his answers earlier in week 2. Why is it taking so long? Because the government can't lead this. Because this is the opposite of government leadership in this place. And where people really want the government to come in there and say, let's do something on this, that is exactly what got the government into the messes it's been in before on Indigenous affairs, which is acting like big daddy government can fix everything. John, they can't. They're following.
John, what do you think about, well, I guess the events of the last 5 days or so and how the government has responded to it?
Well, it really is one of these rare moments where the whole country appears to be gripped by grief. And, for people who followed this was eminently, if not expected, it was eminently possible because the Truth and Reconciliation report has a whole section on unnamed deaths. So, the government awarded money for it in the 2019 budget. It hasn't spent it. But I think it's just brought everybody back to the point where they're thinking about it was a cultural genocide is what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called it, and accurately, because it was a policy designed to rip children from their parents and erase all traces of Indigenous culture. So I think for whatever reason there's been a delayed reaction before people really grasped that fact, because there was not this kind of outcry back in 2015. And I guess from the government's point of view, Trudeau came out and promised he was going to do everything in that report in 2015 without having read it. And he's now finding that there are a whole bunch of things. There's a government website with responses, and he can't do a lot of this stuff, including getting the Pope to apologise.
Right. Joël-Denis, what do you think?
Well, I was wondering whether an address to the nation would have been justified in this case, because we're embarking on a difficult period, because what we saw in Kamloops we will be seeing more of that in the coming weeks. And I think the Prime Minister would have been justified to prepare a nation for a collective grief, if I may say, that will last a few months. And some will argue, did he rise to the occasion for that moment? I'm not sure, but this is clearly a difficult moment for First Nations and for the government to deal with. And as Susan mentioned, they want First Nation leaders to take the lead on this file, because in the past, the government has dictated the way to go forward, and it's not going to be possible in this case. But I think Mr. Trudeau should have risen to the occasion, and a speech to the nation would have been justified in this case.
Peter, just talk quickly on that. One of the most vocal critics for Trudeau thus far has been Jody Wilson-Raybould, who pointed out that his response has been symbolic and half-hearted, and nothing has changed since 2015. That's pretty damning criticism.
Susan, you've written about this. Talk to me a bit about the reaction we've seen from non-Indigenous communities, from Canadians across the country here who, perhaps in large measure, as John pointed out, when we had the Truth and Reconciliation report released some 6 years ago with the recommendations, I'm not sure Canadians grasped the significance of it as much as they have in the last 5 days with the discovery of these bodies.
Yeah, I compared it to the 2015, actually, discovery of, or the horrible sight of that young refugee boy, Alan Kurdi, on the beach. And Canadians had been reading all summer about the stories of Syrian refugees, but that picture, that idea, the innocent child, I think this is very much a moment like that. The big difference is, and this goes to what we were just talking about, is that in that case, Canadians themselves, non-Indigenous Canadians, knew what to do about it. They could sponsor a family. Mm-hmm. They could give to international aid. I think this is where the government might want to do some thinking. Rather than even an address to the nation, can the Prime Minister find something for non-Indigenous Canadians to do with the feelings that we have right now, beyond, thoughts and prayers? Right. Is there something concrete we can do about reconciliation? It's a moment that can be seized, but it's really, really difficult to figure out what we do with that sentiment right now.
All right, we'll see where we go from here. John, let me move to you. MPs from all opposition parties backed a Conservative motion to issue a formal House order to force the Public Health Agency of Canada to hand over to the Speaker unredacted documents on pre-pandemic collaboration between the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg and the Wuhan Institute, and the firing of 2 scientists from the lab earlier this year. And their connections to China. This motion was put forward after the president of the Public Health Agency refused to explain why those 2 scientists were fired. Why is this search for answers important?
Well, I mean, from the opposition's point of view, it's something of a fishing expedition, because it's not clear that the law clerk will allow any of it to become public. I mean, we really don't know what happened here, but it's pretty disturbing that extremely contagious viruses were shipped, apparently illegally, from Winnipeg to Wuhan, which is also at the center of the coronavirus epidemic. So, it's not quite clear what's going to come out of this. I do think that the Prime Minister's line that anybody who asked about it was sort of engendering anti-Asian sentiment was not the right line. And, particularly when Asian Conservative MPs stood up and asked the same question. Right. It was clearly evasion tactics, and whether we actually find out what they were trying to evade, who knows? All
right. Joël-Denis, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the opposition party, the Conservative Party, has been asking some questions on this for the last few weeks, and the Health Minister, Patty Asdoo, and other ministers have been saying that they can't give any answers because, for security reasons. So it raises questions about our own national security if they can answer those questions on national security grounds. So is it a fishing expedition? Probably. Will it give the opposition party some documents that they are seeking? We don't know. But sure, this story has some legs for a few weeks. Okay,
only got about 20 seconds, Susan. Sorry about that. What do you think of what's happening here?
I without opening up a Pandora's box, I don't think of this in isolation from the efforts that Joe Biden and what's going on in the United States right now to find out about the source of the virus. I'm not sure we would have been having this conversation if Donald Trump was still in office, trying to blame everything on China for no good reason. But I think that we're in a different stage now. I think it's a very interesting development given the long history of this.
All right. We'll continue to see how that plays out as well. Thank you all for your time tonight. Good to see you all. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.